Okay, now we're going to do the recording that's going to lead to our dinner break. So what could be more fitting preceding a dinner break than to talk about eating? I'm going to try to simplify a bit for you here because Chapter 10 goes into a ton of detail, and I don't think you necessarily need to know all of these details. The outline, I think, has the key essential information, and I wanted to start with some basics as far as metabolism was concerned. Now, if you've had some biochemical classes, you know that metabolism is very complicated. We're going to try to keep the idea pretty simple here. And the idea is going to start with this idea of set point theory. Your body is set up so that if you don't have enough food coming in, it can still produce enough product in your body so that you can do the tasks you need to do. And then when you get too much food, the idea is your body should be able to store some of the excess so that when you run out, you can use it again. So this is the absorption and fasting phase that we're going to start with. So the outline has it, and then the first page with the pretty pictures on it. So let's start it off with number 1, the absorption phase. In the morning, you wake up and you're usually quite hungry. What normally happens in that situation, if you look at the picture here, the pancreas ends up secreting insulin. And when the insulin comes in and then you ingest the food, that food is used in 3 different ways. First, the food comes in, it's broken down by the cells, and it's used as short-term energy. It's used by the tissue cells as glucose. So storage number 1, or use number 1, is as short-term glucose energy. Now, if you have more than just enough for the cells to do their thing, then the food will be converted by the liver into something called glycogen. We're going to have plenty of G words here. Good thing you don't have to pronounce them like I do. But if you've got more than just your individual cells need, then the liver converts that into glycogen for intermediate energy. A lot of people who are athletes tend to eat a lot of things like pastas and so forth, because once you give your cells just enough immediate energy for that, it'll be stored as intermediate energy by being converted into glycogen, and then when you don't have the energy coming in, it'll be converted back out to glucose. And finally, if you get so much food in that the cells are satisfied for the immediate energy and you've got enough glycogen for intermediate energy, that's where the food will be converted into fat for long-term storage. Of course, there's plenty of that going around these days. So that is the absorption phase. During the fasting phase, when you're not getting any food coming in, the first source of energy that will be used is the short-term energy, glucose, from the cells. But then if you still don't have energy coming in, that glycogen will be converted by glucagon. And glucagon is actually going to convert the glycogen into usable glucose. This is what athletes do by eating the pasta early in the morning or during their rides, so that you can use the glucose right there. And then finally, if you still don't have enough energy in there, the fat will be converted into glucose-based energy. So that was the 2-minute version or 3-minute version of absorption and fasting by Dr. Tausman. It is more complicated than that, but hopefully that'll work for you. Now, the next idea that I wanted to focus on was, what does the brain have to do with all this stuff? There are 2 basic theories here as far as the brain is concerned. One is called glucostatic theory, and it looks like on page 357 they kind of talk about glucostatic theory. The basic idea behind this is that glucose is monitored by the brain, and the key structure up in the brain is the hypothalamus. So in the glucostatic theory, if you're not getting enough glucose, the brain will monitor this and will try to change how much glucose is being used. So it's called glucostatic theory, and it's the idea that glucose levels are monitored. The best evidence I can give you in support of this for the hypothalamus is that if you take actually an animal that is really, really hungry and then just put a tiny bit of glucose up in its hypothalamus, the organism will actually show that it's full and it won't eat anymore. So this is the glucostatic idea. You can add more based on what your book has to say. The other big theory, as far as glucose is concerned, it's actually not glucose at all. It's lipids, fat, and it's called lipostatic theory. And one of the key ideas is that there are centers in your brain that kind of monitor lipid levels. one key structure in your brain is called the lateral hypothalamus. And the lateral hypothalamus is often called the hunger center. And when you stimulate in little rats the lateral hypothalamus, this will get an organism to initiate or start eating. So this is the area that controls the starting of eating. On the other hand, if you take a little rat and you destroy their lateral hypothalamus, they will not want to eat at all. In fact, they will starve themselves to death. So the lateral hypothalamus, page 346, is really considered the feeding center of the brain and the hunger center of the brain because it controls when you start wanting to eat. The other structure in your brain that's right next to the lateral hypothalamus is called the ventral medial hypothalamus. This is the area that's kind of considered the satiety center of the brain. Satiety is for being full. When this area is stimulated in studies with animals, the organism will report being full and will not want to eat anymore. On the other hand, if you go into an organism and destroy this area, then with a lesion, the organism will actually overeat a bunch and will actually grow to be very, very large. It's very interesting, though, what happens with this eating. The eating that we see from these organisms who've had their ventral medial hypothalamus destroyed is actually kind of like finicky binge eating. They'll find their favorite foods, these animals, and just binge on this, things like chocolate and so forth, and it'll basically cause them to be obese. So the ventral medial hypothalamus is actually considered the satiety center of your brain. When these areas were first discovered, the big idea was that there are key structures, the lateral and ventral medial hypothalamus. These are the key structures in your brain that control eating. Now we know it's not nearly this simple. There are a lot of other structures in your hypothalamus and related areas that do a lot of the controlling of eating and satiety, but these are still considered kind of the key structures involved with this. So hopefully this makes sense and you understand it. Thanks. Bye-bye.